welcome to another episode of the Immigrant Education Collaborative Podcast. Today I have a very special guest with me. I have Dr. Karina Donald. Karina, how are you?
I'm doing good. It's been a long day, but I'm good.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Thank you so much for doing this. So I invited Karina on the show because we both were getting our masters at the same time at George Washington University. So I met Karina, and being from St. Vincent, Karina's from Grenada. So I met her, around probably 2009. 10,
Yeah.
somewhere around there, around that time. But Karina has an interesting story, and I wanted her to share her story with us. She was born in Grenada. She'll tell us a story about, being born in Grenada, going to school in Grenada, and then kind of coming to America. So tell us about growing up, Karina. How was that growing up and being a kid in Grenada?
Well, I grew up with my parents, my mother and father, and I have one sibling. So it was the
Hmm.
four of us in one household, but we were always with family. When my grandmother was alive, my grandfather on my father's side, when my grandparents were alive, we were very much taken care of by them while my parents and my parents went to work. And so it was, I would say, and that is something that even my brother, when we reflect on our childhood, said that we had a good childhood in Grenada. We learned a lot about how to manage without electricity because there were instances where like there was something called load shedding, meaning that if too many people had on or was using their power, certain parts of Grenada was without power. So growing up reading on on lamps and those kinds of things in secondary school and in primary school. Um, but yeah, it was a really good childhood. There were some instances where, we had loss of water and knowing because we lived on a hill how to get buckets of water before we actually got a tank
Hmm.
to carry the water up the hill to the house and at the time bathe in cold water. That was something. But I must say that we had a good childhood. We used to play cricket at home, all four of us, or there were evenings when they would turn on the radio and my father would be singing old calypsos by Sparrow and Gypsy and other calypsonians that are local and so it was a really good and happy childhood, but also seeing the different ways in which and how our parents grew up because they didn't grow up with much and they tried to do a bit more than they could. Um, and how they grew up. So my parents really tried to do that. They did not have a bachelor's degree or a master's degree, but thankfully they were able to get different certificate and training programs through the places that they were employed. And so I would say that if they were planted now at this age that I am, I think that they'll probably have a doctorate or two because just knowing where they came from and how much they have learned and share and the amount of information that they read even now, I would say that if they had the means, they would have had very advanced degrees. So yeah, it was a really good childhood and lots of jokes and music playing and I wasn't a very good runner, and so
Yeah.
I couldn't compete in that, but I was willing to play a little cricket at home or wherever we could and have fun that way. So growing up in Grenada, you learn how to deal with the little that you have and still find joy in it and still appreciate it now and those experiences.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That's awesome. So tell us about sort of like your experience like going through the school system in Grenada and sort of how that prepared you to move to America and continue education.
So the interesting thing is that my parents decided to um have my brother and I in a private Catholic school
Hmm.
growing up. The school fees was $50 a term, a semester, or what we call a semester in the US. I mean, I know that the cost of that school now is much more, and at the time the school was under one of the Catholic churches in Grenada, and so we didn't have like things to divide the classes. So, you know, if you were in grade three, you were back to back with grade two and those kinds of things. And I mean, I don't know how we learned
Right.
because it was, I mean, just thinking about it, no, there was a lot of noise, but we were able to concentrate and actually succeed. And many of the children who went there are now doctors and lawyers and, you
Mm-hmm.
know, it was a cheap private school, a Catholic private school run by one of the nuns or so. But it was a very interesting way to grow up because all we had was the parking lot under the church to play and any kind of concrete area, but we made it do. There were lots of cuts and bruises then, but many of us were successful in at the primary school level and moved on to what would be considered prestigious secondary schools in Grenada, like
Mm-hmm.
St. Joseph's Convent, St. George's, and Presentation Brothers College, Grenada Boys Secondary School, and I mean, moving through that piece and not having a sense of privacy learning between the ages of, let's say, about 5 until 11. It
Mm-hmm.
was interesting, but we were successful. And then into secondary school, where I went to an all-girls secondary school now, which was considered like a prestigious secondary school in Grenada. It was a huge transition for me because I was used to having other boys in school, and now I'm only with girls, and
Mm-hmm.
uh, this uniform wasn't very different. It's just that the difference was that we were wearing a tie, but we were always girls were wearing navy blue pleated skirts that you had to
Mm-hmm.
be on your knee, a white shirt and make sure that it's well ironed. And if you're not, it's seen as disrespectful and those kinds of things. But the teachers there really wanted us to keep the reputation of the school up by by performing very well academically. But we also had opportunities to participate in sports, whether it's, you know, just within the school or outside of the school. There were students who were debaters and so on. I was more on the quieter side
Mm-hmm.
at school, but I was involved in like the little sports like cricket and kickball and those kinds of things within the school. But that transition was a big one for me from being with going to school with boys and then with girls only. But it was a big learning experience on how to manage school and the expectation that, well, this school is known to have several subjects to pass in order to
Mm-hmm.
graduate. So it's expected that you have to pass all these different subjects in school. But I honestly have to say that some of them I at the time didn't see the utility in them, but now
Right.
I see. Um, so like after secondary school, there's an option to go to community college,
Mm-hmm.
but in between that, there is an option what they call secretarial school, where you learn like how to type and all of that. And
Mm-hmm.
I opted to do that before I went to a community college, and that helped a lot.
Mm-hmm.
We learned on manual typewriters at the
Right.
time. When I was finishing up in that program, it was a 1 year program after the 5 years in secondary school. Um, they were just starting to introduce electric typewriters, but I learned how to type on a manual typewriter with the ribbon and
Mm-hmm.
manually turning the paper and or those kinds of things. But it's something that I'm still very proficient in typing because of that, and learned like
Yeah.
business English and other like office related things that makes it a lot easier for me in organizing now that I am now teaching at a
Mm-hmm.
higher level. But yeah, that transition, there were always stages to it, and all of from the time I was in primary school all the way up to before community college, I was always in a uniform. And
Mm-hmm.
whether it's public or private school in Grenada, you are expected to wear a uniform, which
Mm-hmm.
is very different from the US.
Right, right, right.
where it's more likely to be a private school that you wear uniform. But in
Hmm.
Grenada, that's part of the culture that you wear
Yeah.
uniform.
Okay, so that's cool. So you had a really solid and supportive, like education experience, especially from your family. So as you're going through school, you're finishing up high school, you're getting ready to, to move into community college. Are you thinking of any careers specifically that you're interested in, that you want to explore?
Well, I wanted to be a teacher.
Mm,
I saw teaching, and my father, before he went into be more in administration through the government, he was a teacher.
gotcha.
And it's only when I started to talk about my interest in teaching, he said, "Well, I was a teacher too." And I was like,
Hmm.
"I didn't know that."
Right.
Um, but just like helping people to learn because my brother and I we are at different levels of education and he was never as interested in school as I was. So I
Hmm.
remember teaching him and my cousin how to read.
Yeah.
And I wasn't that much older than them. And just to
Right.
see how, just having the patience as somebody who's like 11 teaching a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old how to
Hmm.
read and seeing how successful that is and finding creative ways to do that, it was really encouraging and that's what I thought I would get into when I was considering community college. But
Hmm.
I also wanted to know more about people, just generally speaking. And so
Hmm.
the option at the time was to do some more like sociology, and I always like history, so I wanted to do that as well.
Hmm.
Um, so I did history and sociology, and then there is an option if you want to teach at a secondary school to do the focus on a concentration in education.
Hmm.
So so yeah, I did that, and that was another transition from secondary school uniform to now being in community college in Grenada. No uniform and being with students from all over the island. Those
Hmm.
who are I'm from the southern part of Grenada, which is considered a bit more, I guess, urban or town,
Right.
or people call it. But meeting other students from the northern part or the more rural parts of Grenada, and also because Grenada has two neighboring islands as part of the nation of Grenada and Carriacou and
Hmm.
Petit-Martinique. I also met students who are from those islands and boarding in Grenada to attend community college. So that was really nice to see how much they are
Hmm.
as intelligent because there was this perception that only the secondary school that was prestigious was in
Right.
Grenada. These students were just as intelligent and smart,
Yeah.
and just to interact with them was really nice.
Okay, that's cool. So now you're coming into your own. You're thinking, from early on that becoming a teacher is something that you're interested in from early. So what are things that are starting to crystallize for you as you're, finishing up at community college in Grenada in terms of a career?
Well, I was still really interested in teaching, and the
Hmm.
more I went to those classes to prepare to teach, it just affirmed my interest in teaching.
Hmm.
And the thing is that you can take those classes, but you don't necessarily have to go on to actually teach. But I think that helped me to make a more informed decision about that. And all the other electives I took were mainly in visual arts, and that really solidified that teaching is my path.
No, that's really cool. So how did you decide where you were going to go to school in America after you were done getting your associates? How did you make that decision?
So I had a lot of stops along the way in my education, right?
Hmm.
One of the things, especially because my family didn't have the means to just say, "Oh, okay, after community college, you go straight to study."
Hmm.
Um, there was this expectation. I'm not sure if it still exists, but usually there's a stopgap between community college and going to further studies at the bachelor's or higher
Hmm.
up. And so I had taught for about 2 years. So yeah, I had like a 2-year gap between the time that I finished community college before I decided to pursue a bachelor's degree. And during that time, I was teaching. And
Hmm.
so during that teaching, it really taught me a lot more about what type of teacher I am. Because I am a smaller in size than the students, the students didn't always take me seriously because it's like I'm usually shorter or maybe smaller than them in size. But it taught me a lot. And during that time, actually, Hurricane Ivan happened, which was a really bad hurricane around 2004, thereabout.
Hmm.
And so I realized that I couldn't, after that long break of not being in school for about 2 months and teaching, I realized when we came back to school and we were teaching on the tents because of the hurricane damages to the school, I just had the children singing and drawing just how they were feeling because I was feeling the same thing. Not
Hmm.
having power back for 3 months, 4 months, running water took a very long time. And
Right.
so during that time, I realized how much need there was just beyond the learning part of it. And
Hmm.
so that's how I decided, okay, well, education is good, but I think I wanted to get into psychology. At the time, we did not have any accredited bachelor's level program in Grenada. So after teaching for about 2 years, um, I also have family in the US. And so they were always saying, you could always come and study in the US. And I was like, okay, well, this is my time. I've saved some money and able to get some other support to pursue a degree. So I decided to look into universities or colleges in New York.
Hmm.
Um, Mainly because that's where my extended family is, because it's like half
Right.
the family in Grenada, half the family in uh in the US, but specifically a lot of them were in New York at the time.
Hmm.
So that's how I decided to pursue a bachelor's degree because of a hurricane and seeing the effects of that on the children and their
Mm.
concentrate. At the time, I did not know that was really a trauma response. Now I know, but yeah, I decided to pursue a bachelor's degree at Brooklyn College because that was I could walk from Brooklyn College back to my uncle's home, and so that's what I did.
So when you get to Brooklyn College, what do you decide? How did you decide what you were going to major in?
Well, I had an idea from before I got there that I
Hmm.
wanted to do psychology. I
Okay.
didn't know where the psychology would take me, but I thought about doing psychology mainly
Hmm.
because I wanted to find some way to do some sort of counseling or so, but I didn't know when I
Right.
first got there what direction to take.
Hmm.
So I had an idea by then, and my community college did not have psychology, so the only option was sociology, which is you're still learning about people, but more on a larger scale.
Hmm.
And so I wanted to go more on the individual level and understand people and how they think and feel
Yeah.
and kinds of things. So yeah, I had an idea from my own
Okay.
work experience.
From your own and from your lived experience, right? Going through what you went through with the kids after the hurricane. So as you're going through, you're getting your degree in sociology, where's your mind at this point? Are you sort of like at peace with how things are going? Are you comfortable with, the path that you're on, this journey that you're on, even though you don't know exactly where it's going to lead to?
I wasn't. Um, truth be told, I thought psychology as a great path, and I mean, I started reading the few books I had in Grenada before I started, and I was like, this is interesting. But when I actually got there, there was some adjustment I had to make and with the weather,
Hmm.
and that was difficult. In as
Hmm.
much as there were a couple times when I was younger, my family visited New York. It was always in the summer.
Hmm.
But now here I am in the fall, thinking the sun is shining, but it's still hot.
Hmm.
It was cold. And
Right.
so there was a level of adjustment I had to make with the climate
Hmm.
as well as studying in a different country.
Hmm.
And one of my advisors suggested that I also take elective courses that I just want to have fun with.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that helped me with my adjustment. And so I decided to take courses in art, in visual art, which is something I could not do when I was in secondary school. I took a few
Mm-hmm.
courses in my associate degree just for fun,
Mm-hmm.
but I decided to do that. And that balance of having, one course each semester, or at least one course in art and the rest of them in general ed, or I didn't have to take much general ed because of what I completed in Grenada.
Mm-hmm.
But in psychology, that balance of having, okay, maybe some courses in psychology I didn't really like, but then
Right.
having art, that really balanced it off for me. And so
Right.
I continued with it. I never got any kind of complaints from my parents saying,
Right.
oh
Right.
no, you shouldn't take any art because they know I always like to draw since I was very young.
Coming up, you were kind of creative. So what were you doing? Were you doodling? Were you like, making portraits? What type of art were you doing? Because you mentioned the kids after the hurricane in your class drawing, but you didn't mention yourself, being into art. So what were you doing, coming as you were younger? What kind of drawings were you doing?
It was more pencils, colored pencils. Because I mean, my parents didn't have much. I did have a packet of markers at the time I was growing up, but there was always this concern, whether it's from me, but also from my family. Markers is expensive, they're going to dry out. Use the
Mm-hmm.
pencils and the colored pencils quicker because
Mm-hmm.
they're easy to replace. Whenever my parents got opportunities through their job to travel, they would try to find things that my brother and I enjoyed.
Mm-hmm.
And so my brother was more into cars. I wanted to draw, so they would find creative things for me
Mm-hmm.
and then cars for my brother.
Right.
So that's how it started with an interest that
Mm-hmm.
there were times when I just got lost in drawing,
Yeah.
houses, mountains, because of where I
Yeah.
grew up. I could see mountains just outside of the veranda in Grenada.
Yeah.
So that's what I was drawing. I was drawing things in my environment,
Yeah.
um, just as a form of recreation. And so I was never told to stop doing that.
Yeah.
And so I think that really helped me to pursue that or to find other ways creatively or even during my bachelor's degree
Mm-hmm.
to continue drawing and
Yeah.
art.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because this interest that you had was actually supported and nurtured by your parents, to the best of their ability at the time, right? And so the reason I kind of wanted you to come back and cover that because like when I meet you in life, you're at a certain point, right? But now you're telling the story of, before we met. And, so now it's connecting the dots for me,
Yeah.
where it is. But, as the story unfolds, people will see where I'm going with this. Okay. So then you're at Brooklyn College. You're majoring in psychology. So what are you thinking, when you get out of Brooklyn College? What are some things that you're thinking about, career-wise that you're going to do? What are you pondering?
Um, I didn't really have a clear idea at the very beginning
Mm-hmm.
where to go with psychology.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it was very interesting because I just assumed that with a psychology degree, I could counsel people.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, okay, when I finish, I could just be a counselor, whether that is in the US or Grenada, I will
Yeah.
counsel people, not knowing that it's a lot more complicated than that. And so there was a year that I went back home and I met actually a nun or a religious sister, and I was telling her about, some of the things that I noticed as a teacher when I was after a hurricane and having the kids draw and how they seem to do better after that. Those different classes were just drawing. And she is a marriage and family therapist, and she said, well, why don't you combine art and psychology? And I was like, I didn't even know that was a thing. And she said,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, there's something called art therapy. I was like, oh, okay. So I looked it up after my little visit to Grenada and came back and continued my studies. I looked into it, and that was around close to the end of my second year in my bachelor's. I took about 3 years to finish the bachelor's because again, I had some credits from Grenada, general ed credits that I was able to transfer. And so during the time that I learned about art therapy, I started researching it more and more. We
Mhm.
didn't have Google as readily available,
Right.
but use whatever search engine, Netscape, and so on to see what little information I could find and realize that that is an actual viable um, career. And
Mhm.
so I looked at different programs that were in New York actually and saw like what they required. And so I started after close to the end of my second year, started registering and planning the rest of my courses so that I could have all the prerequisite courses to pursue art therapy.
Mhm.
So it was just in talking with somebody about my interests
Right.
and then they suggested art therapy, and that's what I went on to do.
And that's how you discovered art therapy.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's interesting because again, you're combining, two things that you're interested in. And on top of that, you weren't even aware that this field had already been pioneered, you know what I mean? And it was an option for you. All right.
Yeah.
Okay, so how do you make the decision on which art therapy program you're going to enroll in?
But that was a very hard decision. After I graduated from, well, just before I graduated from Brooklyn College with my bachelor's in psychology, I started applying for programs mainly in New York because I mean, already there, I have a place to stay at my uncle's, and so I just started applying to places, and then I think it was another family member who said, just try to expand it. You never know, you might want to be out of New York, but I didn't want to be out of New York. I wanted to stay because
Right.
I mean there's so many Caribbean people in especially in Brooklyn.
Hmm.
And but I applied to three different places outside of New York, one in Virginia, one in one in the southern part of Virginia, and then George Washington, which is like it's in DC, the main campus, but that art therapy program is in Northern Virginia, and then one in Connecticut. Um, and I just waited for their responses. And during the wait, I went back to Grenada because I had finished my degree, did all of the interviews for each program. And then I got responses from I think all of them said yes. And because again, had to think about where am I going to finance this master's, didn't have a scholarship or anything. My parents and I sat and thought about it, and they were like, this is a huge sacrifice. We don't know where we're going to get the money. And so I felt really sad about it. And I said, okay, well, I don't know what to do. So I just said, you know what? Let me just ask. I'll
Hmm.
ask them if they have any scholarships or anything. And the only university that said that they offer scholarships or any kind of fellowships is George Washington University.
Hmm.
And that's how I ended up there.
Yeah.
The other universities, although they seemed on paper to be cheaper,
Hmm.
with a scholarship from George Washington, it was a lot easier to get like a smaller student loan for the rest of the money because I wasn't like funded for the entire master's, but I was working part-time during that
Yeah.
time and also had a student loan
Yeah.
in from Grenada. So
Yeah.
so yeah, the decision to go to George Washington is because of scholarship.
Gotcha, gotcha, gotcha. So you go through the art therapy program, you complete the art therapy program. So now you're an art therapist, right? And at this point. So what is your first job, in art therapy? Like what's the first thing that you do coming out of the art therapy program to like launch into the profession of art therapy?
My first job was actually not titled as an art therapy
Mm,
job. It was actually at an assisted living facility not too far where I lived in Virginia at the
mm,
time.
mm-hmm,
It was what they call a life enrichment. can't remember the exact title, but basically kind of like a recreational therapist kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing. But honestly, when I interviewed for the job, they said that that is what they were looking for. It's just
Right, right.
a title. So I was working there, and then I had a part-time job at a women's shelter in
Mm.
DC. So I
Mm-hmm.
had two jobs at the time.
Yeah.
So one was at an assisted living, and then women at shelter, and they also had other programs for women in recovery and things like that. So that
Mm-hmm.
had nothing to do with art therapy. The assisted living programs, it was just starting up, so I had opportunity to develop art therapy groups
Mm.
and individual sessions with with the residents there, and that was really eye-opening for me to see how those residents were very receptive to me. I was new and the facility was new, so everyone was learning together. And it was a really awesome opportunity to apply art therapy, even though my title wasn't. So I
Right.
was there for a year, and thinking about what are the next steps. And I always wanted to go back to Grenada, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
And so a year after that, I went back. Well, actually, let me step back. I missed this one. As soon as I graduated, I actually applied for a job in Grenada
Mm-hmm.
as a counselor in the Ministry of Social Services.
Mm-hmm.
I never heard back from them, and I saw that as a sign. I grew up in a spiritual household, religious household. So anytime you see signs, if you ask God for something and it didn't happen, it means that that's a sign.
Right, right.
And I never got a response. And my parents being in Grenada, they were asking like, well, what's going on? And they never got a response either from all of the stuff that I sent by mail for the application. And but anyway, a year after that, I went back to Grenada and applied for a different job. This was mainly working with children who have a history of trauma, um, children and teens at the time. And it was so I applied for that job and I got it. They called me from the US and said, we would like to interview you. I was like, I'm so sorry, I'm not
Yeah,
I'm not in the US.
yeah.
So they actually waited for me
Mm-hmm.
and said they would like to hire me as a counselor. And but really and truly, all I did was art therapy in that role. And
Nice.
so it wasn't something where they said, yeah, I shouldn't do that or so. I was able to provide art therapy to the children and the adolescents or teens I was meeting with and help them through different traumatic experiences, which was
Mm-hmm.
really enriching for me to be able to all the things that I learned, and it came full circle. Not now I'm going back to Grenada
Right.
as as an art therapist and not as a teacher. So I was
Mm-hmm.
still offering some kind of way of helping children through their traumatic experiences, but now I'm trained at a master's level to
Yeah,
practice. So
yeah.
that was nice.
Yeah. And again, like you said, it's a full circle moment because I remember after the hurricane, at the time when the kids were doing their drawings and you said it was therapeutic, you didn't realize at the time kind of that's what was happening. So as you're having that experience, are you connecting all that, from what happened before the hurricane? No?
I was not connecting anything. I was just trying to live the best quote unquote life I could.
Mm-hmm.
My parents always instilled in my brother and me, that you try to do good things. We don't expect you to be a doctor or lawyer. We just want you to have decent jobs, be respectful, and a person of integrity. They
Mm-hmm.
never forced us to be any particular profession. They just wanted us to excel in things that we enjoy. And they also honestly found a lot of different ways to encourage that. Um, I know I didn't say that, but I think I'm talking sometimes in circles because that's part of how we talk in Grenada at times. But I
Okay.
could remember instances where my brother or me, we would say we're interested in this, whether it's dancing or tennis or drumming, and they would find some way, even if it might be secondhand drumsticks or a tennis rack, for us to get involved in that sport or activity. And sometimes we might stay with it for a while, and sometimes we might just stay with it for a month, but it never really stopped us from being interested or pursuing something that
Yeah,
we just had a curiosity about. And I think
yeah,
that's why I was more open about, okay, well, if this doesn't work, maybe something else works. And that's
yeah.
simply because of how we grew up.
And I think you're absolutely right, right? Because your parents didn't put that pressure on you, didn't put any sort of restrictions on you. You were open to seeing kind of, let's see where this thing takes me, right? And it's based on just having good intentions, having the integrity, like you said, they want you to have, and just being open to see where these possibilities would take me. So from this job, when do you start thinking about, going to get your doctorate as you're doing this job we're talking about?
I'm smiling because I could remember the first like half year I was at my job in Grenada, full time as a counselor art therapist. My boss looked at me and he said, you're not suited for this job. And I'm like, what do you mean I'm not suited? I enjoy it. He's like, no, you want something higher. I said, I don't understand what he meant by that.
Mhm.
But one of the things that I really enjoyed is that I was also supervising people who did not have the skills to be counselors, who
Mhm.
didn't have a master's degree, or maybe just had a bachelor's degree, or just interested in counseling. And so at the master's level, with me having at least a year under my experience, and then other people who are hired in the role as counselor, but not having that kind of training, I was mentoring them and I really enjoyed it. And so I was reading a lot of other things to help me be a better mentor to people who were interested in a field but didn't have the means to get the training. And as I was thinking about it, I thought about maybe I should do maybe clinical psychology as a higher option where I could focus on mentoring people, but also doing research related to things that are specific to Grenada and the Caribbean, interventions that fit best for us. Because when I moved back to Grenada a year after I graduated with my master's, there were things that just did not apply to the culture. Sometimes the way that I was taught how to say something just didn't sit well for Grenadians. I could remember a time when I was talking with a family and just kind of preparing them for the next steps with starting counseling. And I was so excited and, meeting with this family and so on. And it's like their face just started to change because they were very excited to meet me. But as I started talking, their face changed to being more like distant. That's when I realized that, oh, okay, what I'm saying is not sitting well for them.
Mhm.
So I started looking into clinical psychology. I applied for clinical psychology programs. I did not get into any of them. And I saw it as a sign again, what I
Mhm.
learned from especially my mother and my other female family members. Um, and I was thinking a lot about what I should do next. I think I firmly believe that I should be doing research. I just didn't know what that looked like. Not clinical psychology because we didn't have any program like that in Grenada. I did not want to stay in the Caribbean because I just felt that I would not get as much exposure to a variety of resources. And
Mhm.
so I started looking into other programs that I should do beyond my master's. And it was actually one of the children's parents that I worked with who put a little spark in me. And because my job was to work mainly with children and teens. And this mother said, "So why do y'all forget about us?" And I was like, "What do you
Mm.
mean?" My child is a daughter. My daughter has an entire family that's still traumatized too. Well,
Yeah,
this is a very sanitized version of what she said because you may
right,
not
right,
understand the Canadian accent, but
right.
it made she had a very good point.
Mm-hmm.
I was paid and expected to work with the children and the teens. The families were secondary, but they also were affected by whatever their children were exposed to. So I started looking into marriage and family therapy programs. So by my second year of working in Grenada, I started looking into marriage and family therapy. I thought if I could combine art therapy that I already had at the master's level
Mm-hmm.
and pursuing a doctorate in marriage and family therapy, not a master's, because in my mind I was thinking that if I do a doctorate, I could do more research.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started looking into programs in marriage and family therapy. And there was one program that was willing to accept my art therapy degree and
Mm-hmm.
just let me take the prerequisite courses in marriage and family therapy at the master's level while pursuing a doctorate in marriage and family therapy. And so that's how I got into marriage and family therapy because of a client. So
Nice.
most of my career is influenced by a student, a client,
Right,
you know,
right.
those
Yeah.
different steps because I enjoy working with people generally speaking, and I find joy in learning from the people I work with, and they teach me new things every single day. I actually have a little piece of paper that I kind of write down different slangs that my young clients will teach
Right.
me because I'm always learning.
Right.
Um, and so that's how I got into a doctorate because I
Mm-hmm.
still enjoy the research process, but also
Mm-hmm.
disseminating that and seeing how it fits in the Caribbean communities.
Yeah. No, that's really cool. And I think for you, like you talked about how, like early on you wanted to be a teacher, right? Because you thought, you like to help and you like to teach people. And then it's kind of like that's the path that your life has taken you through. But it's also because you were well grounded from your family and well supported, which just allowed you to just be open and receive the path that the universe cleared for you. So tell me now where you are professionally, like all the schooling's out the way, you have the art therapy, you have the, marriage and family therapy down. So how are you feeling now in terms of, starting off in that Catholic school, where there's partitions or chalkboards as walls, open space to where you are now? And you're also a professor now, so you kind of
Yeah,
everything that you thought about, you're doing it.
actually, just before we kind of set up the time to meet, I was like, I have a lot to say because it's not things that I just automatically think of, you
Yeah.
know. After my doctorate. I got a job teaching
Mm-hmm.
at an institution in North Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
I was there for about a year, but during that time, that was just like 2020, 2021, which was a really rough time well, I mean, I was lucky to get a job and I didn't
Yeah.
fully finish my doctorate. So I was finishing up my doctorate while working full time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I enjoyed the teaching and all of my colleagues, but I was still missing the reason why I actually did a doctorate, which was
Yeah.
research.
Mm.
And so I started looking for jobs where I could continue to pursue the passion that I have and interest I have in research, but find ways to be able to travel back home when I would like to, especially in the
Mm-hmm.
summer because my parents are still in Grenada and be able to contribute in some way, even though that I'm in the US.
Mm-hmm.
So I was looking for jobs everywhere,
Yeah.
but I prefer to be on the East Coast. I was a little bit biased in that way because it would be easier for me to get a flight to go to Grenada.
Right, right, right.
I'm all the way in the Northwest or
Yeah.
something. That's a stretch to travel.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I always thought about, my parents are retired. If something happens, my brother doesn't live in Grenada, he's in Canada. Like,
Mm-hmm.
how can we still be there? I mean, we have family in Grenada, but it's not the
Right.
same as having your children there.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So yeah, I applied and got the a job as an assistant professor in art therapy at
Hmm.
Florida State University. So I've been there for about 4 years now. Um, I'm enjoying it.
Yeah.
I really enjoy it. Again, the, there will be signs according to what my mother and other female relatives say. You'll get a sign if you need to move or go
Right.
somewhere else. But I must say that I've found community here. I get to do the research I enjoy.
Hmm.
Um, and in the summer, I get to spend at least a month in Grenada or in the Caribbean to offer art therapy. And also do research.
Yeah.
Some of the clients I have currently are actually from the Caribbean, and they found me or been told about me in some way. And that's how I got connected to some of my current clients. But I also try to give back to the community in any way that I can. So, like a few weeks ago, I worked with a nonprofit, and they usually plan like summer programs. And so I've been collaborating with them for a while, but I also turned it into a research study. So like
Hmm.
a, you ever know about research pre and post test, just to see like, is there any effective children participate in this community program and things like
Hmm.
that. And there have been some changes and some positive effects on their self-esteem in participating in just a week of
Hmm.
having art therapy and other types of programming that they may not get in a regular school year.
Yeah.
So the reason why I do it that way is that I get to do my research, but I am also relying on the community and their needs to let me know what they would like, how I can fit in, and how maybe they can use my research to probably ask for more funding and support that they need.
Yeah.
And uh, and through that, I've been able to get some of my students from Florida State to travel with me to experience a different culture, to get the nice beaches in Grenada as
Yeah.
well, and to see what art therapy looks like in a different culture. Because I mean, I have to teach from the textbooks and so on, but I always try to challenge the students to think outside of the box because you may still have a client in the US, but they may have a different culture or a different view, and you have to try to adapt those interventions and those approaches to be able to meet the needs of the client. And so I think that that has been very rewarding to see how the things that I have been doing in or interested in Grenada is still something that I can continue to do while also teaching. So yeah.
That's really awesome, man. And I'm very happy for you. I want to be respectful of your time. So I have like three more questions and we'll just do it rapid fire, right? So the first question is this.
Well, you could do rapid fire. I have time, but anyway.
But I want to respect your time. So here's the thing. The first question is this, right? Um, as this path that you've actually like pioneered your own path, right? Have there been any young people, coming behind you, asking you about, your career path, your journey, art therapy, marriage and family therapy? Have anyone, like sought out your counsel who's interested in pursuing a similar path?
Um, Not that exact path. I've
Hmm.
had students, like previous students, ask me why I decided to do like a doctorate in marriage and family therapy.
Hmm.
Or I've been approached by some children, some like younger people or just early career teachers in the Caribbean who asked me how I got into art therapy because they'd never heard of it before. So those are some of the things that has happened. I'm not sure where they took that information,
Yeah.
but yes, I've had that happen where they ask me why. And interestingly, all of the persons who've asked me about either my training in marriage and family therapy, my research or doctorate or art therapy are all students who are people who are of African descent, whether they are in the Caribbean or in the US. I don't get those questions from people who
Yeah.
are not immigrants
Yeah.
or if they're not of African descent.
Yeah. No, 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 I get it. So let me ask you this. Here's another question for you. if you were to talk someone into following a similar, career trajectory, right? Art therapy, marriage and fa family counseling, how would you talk them into doing this? Like, who would this be a good fit for, especially the art therapy piece?
I think that you have to have an interest in creating art. I'm talking about visual art
Mm-hmm.
just on your own. You have to have
Mm-hmm.
an interest and passion in it because part of it is that you will be required to have like a portfolio to just get into a program. So they want to see your visual art skills. And
Mm,
so having that training and courses in the visual arts, whether that is drawing, painting, sculpture, that really strengthens the success in getting accepted.
gotcha.
Um, and for marriage and family therapy, but also for art therapy, you have to have an interest in psychology and the counseling field.
Mm-hmm.
Because that interest will bring you a long way. If you don't have an interest in it, when you are getting support and trying to hone your skills in counseling, sometimes you might be getting constructive criticism. And if you're not willing to receive that, it might make it a bit more difficult for you to pursue that career because there's a lot
Mm-hmm.
of self-reflection that has to happen and coming to grips with who you are as a person, where you come from. That is something that is required in most mental health programs where you want to be a counselor or therapist. And so being willing to be comfortable with the uncomfortable of that process is really important. So an interest in psychology, openness to changing, but also coming to grips and facing some of the truths about yourself, maybe your family history as well, is
Mm-hmm.
is helpful.
Yeah. No, I really love it. And I think that you're a great role model for a lot of folks who may not know that this is a viable career path to follow. You know what I mean? So I really appreciate that and I respect that. So here's my final question. What are some research topics that you're excited about, tackling down the road going forward?
Well, I have an ongoing summer research related to community art therapy. So
Mm-hmm.
that's like a subfield within art therapy where you're collaborating with leaders in the community or just members in the community on what they need and trying to find ways to integrate art therapy into what already exists. So, for example, last year the community, they were looking at trying to find ways to help the children in a particular village, just try to find other ways to express their feelings without fighting or without aggression. And so a lot of the art therapy was about just understanding how to use materials, not necessarily to create anything beautiful, but using the process of art making to help them calm down and just be able to identify their feelings so that gradually they'll understand and find ways within themselves, but also maybe teaching them one or two skills and how to express their feelings in ways that doesn't endanger anyone or themselves.
Yeah.
So that's one project. I have written about family art therapy and art therapy practice related to Caribbean families and resilience. So that is
Mm-hmm.
something that got me into the field. Like, that same parent I told you about who was like, well, we need help too.
Right.
And so instead of developing new interventions, a lot of my research is looking at the existing resources that families have and how do a marriage and family therapist, but also art therapists tap into those resources to help. So it's like a lot of my research looked at, okay, well, spirituality is important. So how do we integrate spirituality into marriage and family therapy or just art therapy specific for Caribbean families and not
Mm.
any other families? So that's some of my research. I have some other projects in Florida,
Okay.
but my passion projects are in the Caribbean when I get to go there or maybe Zoom and meet with communities and
Mm-hmm.
families to work with them.
Okay, so I'm gonna smush these last two questions together. You ready? It's a smush together rapid question. So here's the last question. what do you enjoy most, right, about the work that you do, right? That's the first part of the question. And the second part of the question, on this journey that you've been on, what's been some of the most surprising things that you've discovered about yourself going through this process? So what do you enjoy most, and what are some of the surprising things that you've enjoyed along the way?
I enjoy the fact that I don't have to do the same thing every day.
Mm,
I have a small private practice that I enjoy. It's a small private practice. I get to teach, I get to do research.
mm,
So every day is not the same. I might be teaching the same courses every year or so, but it's like there are so many different parts to my job that I'm never bored because there's something else to do on this other aspect of my job. So I think that's what I enjoy is that there are many different skills that I'm required or education training that I need to have, but that has really helped me to have many different hands in different things. And so
hmm
I enjoy that because when I was doing I enjoyed working as a therapist full time, but I think that the research and the teaching I was missing. So now
Yeah.
that I get to do each of those are different, some of them are a bit more than others, depending on the months and parts of the year. But I enjoy that.
hmm
What's surprising?
Yeah.
Ooh, what's surprising me is that I did not think I would be willing to move around so much
Yeah.
after leaving Grenada. I thought I would be from Grenada to New York and that's where I would stay. I didn't think I would be in North Carolina or in Florida or in Texas or in like Virginia. I didn't think I would be in all those places and how willing I am to adapt to those different places. I don't think I've lost my Caribbean identity.
hmm
I try to kind of temper my accent, but it does come out, especially when I get excited or maybe something upsets me, it comes out, so I have to slow down. But what surprised me is that I still hold on to who I am as somebody from Grenada. I'm still proud of my Grenadian heritage. And, when independence was earlier this month, and I was in my Grenadian airing 473 area code and those kinds of things. And these are things that I'm proud of. I don't hide that I'm from the Caribbean. I'm proud of that, and my parents they haven't really instilled that in me, and that's who I am.
That's awesome. Well, I'm extremely proud of you because I've known you for a while, and I'm extremely proud of not just what you've accomplished, but the person that you are. Like you're still just a wonderful human being. So I'm very proud. I'm very happy for you, and I thank you for doing this. Thank you, Dr. Karina Donald, and this has been another episode of the Immigrant Education Collaborative Podcast. See you next time.